you all to the last day of our 3-day web interactive session, Let's Talk Linguistics, organized by Department of Linguistics, University of Calcutta. Department of Linguistics has a great legacy continuing more than a century, and many more prominent personalities such as Professor Mohammad Shahidullah, Harinath De, Suniti Kumar Chatterjee, Shukumar Sen, and many more have been a part of this department. Today, we all have gathered here in this social platform to talk about linguistics as a subject, as a career, and as an experience as a whole. This is a 3 days interactive web session. Different speakers from different careers concerning linguistics will be present here. We will discuss the wide variety of scopes that the linguistics has to offer. Before we move on to the speakers, I would like to address our audience who is watching us in our YouTube channel. You all are requested to write down all your questions in the comment section of YouTube. We will then put your questions in front of our speakers to answer. Today's topic is doing research in a non-English speaking country. Now, I would like to request Obi to carry on from here. Thank you and welcome you all.
Thank you, Arundhati. So our first speaker today is Dr. Somdev Kar. Dr. Somdev Kar is an associate professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Ropar. He completed his MA in Applied Linguistics from University of Hyderabad and PhD in Linguistics from Eberhard Karls University of Tübingen, Germany. He has also been associated with Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore, and Qatar University, Doha, Qatar. Our second speaker today is Dr. Anit Nandi. Dr. Anit Nandi earned his PhD in Languages and Intercultural Studies from School of Social Sciences at Heriot-Watt University, Edinburgh, UK, as a prestigious James Watt Scholar. As of 2020, he is working as a Senior Research Associate in the Sociolinguistics Division of the Royal Galician Academy, Spain. And since January 2021, he has also started working as a guest researcher at Leiden University, Netherlands. Welcome, Dr. Somdev Kar and Dr. Anit Nandi. Let us now begin with our session.
Thank you.
So my first question to both of you would be, why linguistics? Why did you both choose linguistics as your subject of study? Anit, sir?
Well, it's a very tough question for me because I generally don't define myself as a linguist. And I talked about this. Obviously, it's a generic term and we use it quite often to reach people. But I would rather say that I consider myself as a more of a, my research area is more centered, obviously, it's a part of linguistics, but is most related to sociology of language, which is a part of sociolinguistics, and many of you have already studied. So yeah, when I was studying my MA in English, I don't have a background in linguistics until I reached Spain. So it's like my interest was there. I started studying English MA in Bardhaman University. And that point of time, there were like few special papers, like, optative papers that you generally have in language. So it's like language and communication and stuff like that, mostly applied linguistic stuff related to how to teach a language, a foreign language. And I developed some interest in multilingualism, language death, all these kind of different terms that was really a bit dramatic that point of time. I think Somdev will agree. That point of time when in early 2005 or something, when I was studying my MA, and it was like kind of a catchy term, hearing language death. Wow, sounds interesting. And David Crystal's book was there, and linguistic imperialism and stuff like that. I really started developing a kind of an interest in comparing different contexts and things like that. So that really related to my interest to study more different sociolinguistic contexts, including Spain. And I started learning Spanish, and then I ended up in Spain, and now I'm talking to you from Spain now. So it's like, that's how this whole interest developed. And then I applied for a MPhil in linguistics. When I finished my MA, I moved on and I applied for an MPhil in linguistics, which was then I chose linguistics at a later stage. But obviously the interest was always there. So yeah, mine is a slightly different route. Maybe Somdev could give you a more proper idea on that.
Yeah, thank you, Anit sir. So, Somdev sir.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes sir, yes sir.
Okay. Well, unlike Anik, my route in linguistics was pretty, linguistic thing. So I did my bachelor's and master's both in linguistics. So if you ask me the starting point, well, it's after my higher secondary when I was about to become an economics person. Like I was about to join BSc Economics. For the first time, I came to know about linguistics. The credit goes to my father, who first told me about linguistics, as he started a paper uh, on linguistics as part of his MA. And being in College Street for a large part of my school days, I was always wondering what people study in that Sanskrit college, because it is just my neighbor building, because I studied in Hindu school, so it is adjacent. And I thought it is only Sanskrit thing, but then I came to know this whole new term linguistics has something to do with Sanskrit college also, because it is one of the very small list of places where they teach linguistics at the undergrad level. And then, well, I started reading about this subject and got some interest and joined Sanskrit College as a BA student, BA and honors in linguistics. And yes, over time I loved it. But by the way, that time I first met Aditi. She was my teacher there during my BA. I think she was a fresh PhD that time. I mean, I learned a lot that time about sociolinguistics. But over time, I moved to Hyderabad for my MA in Hyderabad Central University, which is officially known as University of Hyderabad. There, the degree that is given is the MA in Applied Linguistics, and after the completion of MA, I joined MPhil there itself. But well, somehow I did not or could not complete my MPhil. I don't know, Anik, you completed your MPhil? When you mentioned.
So in what happens in Europe, that if you don't have like when I was studying my MA degree in Bordhoman, the only thing that you at that point, I don't know how it was in CU, but in Bordhoman there was no such thesis thing. But now I think they have introduced it now. But without a thesis, just prior thesis, you can't enter into the PhD. So I had to do an MPhil, which they call in a very different way, but they call it.
I understand. This is like a bridging between MA and PhD.
Yeah, you need to. I mean, you have to have a thesis, prior thesis, to enter in the PhD. So that's how.
Exactly. So my situation was something like I joined the MPhil, finished the coursework, but before I started writing my dissertation, I got the offer to join PhD at Tübingen in Germany, and then I had to leave my MPhil midway. And in early 2005, I joined the PhD program at University of Tübingen in Germany. And then, after the completion, I moved back to India and joined CIIL, and then slowly moved to my present work, etc. I mean, I think we'll be discussing all this over time.
Thank you, Somdev sir. So, Onyx sir, as you mentioned, you are from English background basically, and you did not have prior knowledge about linguistics. So, did you find it difficult to adopt to this discipline as you moved to linguistics?
Well, when frankly speaking, I'm coming from both my parents are from Sanskrit language. So it's like they studied and they're interested. So I had always like, I was a voracious reader as well when I was a kid. So it's like, I mean, I still do reading, but more related to our research papers than reading like for pleasure and all that, right? So obviously, when I was a kid, both my parents, they always instigated an interest in language, and language is something that interested me, but mostly from the multilingualism perspective. So like, I love to speak. I understood that one thing I do quite quickly is to learn a language. So it's like, I wanted to go and see more things instead of going for critical theories. Obviously, I studied critical theories as an optional paper afterwards, but I didn't choose that one when I was in MA. So I chose, because there are only 3 papers available, and it was very Chomskyan when I started there. But there was one professor, and I should have admitted it first, because he's late Amir Basu, who happened to be my professor in the University of Bardhaman. And he was a scholar and a direct student of David Crystal. So in Leeds, when he was. So it's like he studied there. And he happens to be the first person who introduced me to these whole realm of languages as such, language and communication, the communication theories, the models, how the languages developed, language acquisition stuff and all that. So it really instigated an interest. But then finally, when you finish your MA, and then I was a bit clueless for a while, because I know that the many other colleagues from Bardhaman, they will agree on that, because there was no such thing that you can go and do something. And, I always studied in Bardhaman, so never went out. And I came to Kolkata, to College Street, was just to buy some books maybe, or some variations and all that, and things like that, some books that you need. So frankly speaking, the only interest at that point of time, I didn't know what to do. And then I thought that, okay, fine, I like foreign languages. Why don't I give a try on that? Because I was reading about Spain for a long time, and it was kind of an interest grew because of I immediately finished my MA. I started working as a guest lecturer at Vivekananda College in Bardhaman. So it's like, obviously, that's the point of time. And I was teaching language, actually, that point of time, because I was only interested because I was 40 marks, second year students, those like phonetics and all that. I do remember that there was a very interesting book from P. Balasubramaniam, which was a very basic book for phonetics and BRP and things like that. So it's like, I went ahead and applied for this and got accepted and started teaching. And there was, I met a professor who happens to be, who knew me before as well, from English department, who also maintained a very strong interest in language and foreign languages, because he was a French scholar as well. Professor Shopon Kumar Bandyopadhyay, and he was also from CU and gold medalist in his own time, and he's a French scholar. He introduced me. It was like, I decided to go for French, and then I finally ended up in Spanish, because there was no such Alliance didn't have at that point of time any admission going on. So I went to Kolkata, and since I don't want to spend the whole day outside, I was like, okay, fine. Then I will go and check in Gold Park whether they have Spanish. And then I went there and just started. And then obviously the whole thing that you can call it as a difficult as such, I don't see it, because it depends on in what angle you want to approach to linguistics, right? Because I always had this sociological aspects in my head. So it's like I went ahead and I always chose those areas that I generally preferred. So in MPhil, I had a wide range of papers, and ended up doing one paper on Hittite language, which is like, because I've got when I reached in Santiago de Compostela, I had to choose between different papers. So the only paper I do remember that was a bit difficult for me as such, because I didn't have any base in documentational linguistics or stuff related to it, that really become a slightly complicated, because it's this Indo-European linguistics course, and I didn't have any base in Indo-European linguistics. And I thought on my own that it would be a Sanskrit course, because the professor who used to teach that course in MPhil, he was a teacher of Sanskrit as well. So it's like, okay, fine, it will be a Sanskrit course. I will, when you are I came there when I was 25 or something. So like obviously that point of time you don't have this decision. You don't know many people in Santiago to ask what should be the best course to choose and all that. I knew what, like, okay, language acquisition, I will go for it. And most of, like, I do remember that the 7 courses that I have attended, if I'm not wrong, 4 of them were, the medium of instruction was English. One was in 2 was in Spanish, and 1 was in Galician, which happens to be my PhD topic afterwards. So like obviously I didn't have the knowledge of Galician to attend the course in Galician. That was much more difficult, I would say, in the very beginning, because you struggle with the language. That is one of those issues, and then you want to study. So I reached and I studied all those courses that could really help me to, to build my competence. And I chose the last one in Galician because I left it. I need time, for at least a year, to pick up the language, at least to understand the classes and all that. So yeah, it was not that difficult as such, because you have places to choose. Maybe if it is in undergrad, that won't be that easy, So I think so. I don't know, what would Somdev say?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Somdev, so like as you said, as Onik sir said, MPhil is necessary at some point, and you said you actually did not complete your MPhil, and then you went on to your PhD. So, and you have also been a student of linguistics from the very beginning. So, how has your journey been different from his, or how has it been actually? Is there any problem, or like how has it been?
Yeah, very good point. Actually, this MPhil business is a bit tricky, particularly in last few years. I think is still in early 2000, MPhil was kind of necessity for many universities to join PhD program. And that time, universities, that was a parallel channel to join the PhD if somebody doesn't have a NET or SET or so. But over time, what is happening in our country at least, MPhil is slowly, becoming, I would not say it totally lost its value, but many universities are slowly doing away with it. But MPhil is a very good program before joining any PhD program. It creates a solid foundation for a research oriented journey that we are losing. But well, government's policy, particularly the education policy, changes over time. For me, it was not a big problem, because I eventually did my PhD in an European country where MPhil is not a necessity. MPhil is more of a British system that our education system adopted. So in other countries, MPhil was not so important. Many countries, even it does not exist. Particularly in Germany, after Magister, anyone can. Magister is more like master's program here, and people join PhD directly. I am now for last 10 years. I am in a IIT, and in IIT, MPhil has no specific. It doesn't add any value when someone joins in PhD, because here the system is more like based on the national level test like NET or GATE or so. But particularly in our department, like humanities and social sciences, we always give certain uh, um, additional point to that if someone has MPhil. So we let that candidate, go ahead with PhD, that PhD registration. We say registration not in the sense somebody is joining, but when someone is ready to start the actual research part with 3 less credit course credit. So we assume that someone having an MPhil is at least few steps ahead with someone without the MPhil. So we give certain weightage to that. But in other departments, well, that is not anyway our point here. Other disciplines may or may not have. But for me, it was not a big problem. I heard at some point of time my colleagues and friends say universities like Delhi University or even at Hyderabad University, MPhil was almost a necessity to join PhD. The situation is maybe now a bit different, but yeah, someone with a more recent PhD can clarify it more. Well, the little more I would like to add here. Among the IITs, IIT Hyderabad has an MPhil program in humanities, and that includes linguistics. So I'm not sure whether they're still running it or not, because that is one of the new generation IITs like IIT Ropar, and they started it. So keeping their position on MPhil, we also thought of starting MPhil at some point of time, but then it is still on hold. Yeah, that's the MPhil story here.
So, sir, a follow-up question to you would be, if I'm not wrong, according to a recent government regulation, MPhils are not really of much importance anymore. So,
Yeah, finish it.
yeah. So, like, how will the credit system be for the new generation PhD students, and what are your views on that?
Well, I would not say MPhil will give you entry ticket to PhD anymore without NET or SET or some other uh, exam, the entrance kind of exam. But MPhil will add to the value in the sense, see, after joining the PhD program, a student has to go through coursework. So, depending on the university or institute, it can be 15 credit or 12 credit or 20 credit. So each course has certain credit, right? 3 credit or 4 credit. So in our institute at IIT Ropar, we let the MPhil, I mean, a candidate with MPhil degree go ahead with 12 credit only, whereas with only MA, it has to be 15 credit. So eventually, uh, a PhD student has to do at least one more course if he or she doesn't have MPhil. So MPhil is having some weightage there. But once again, with only MPhil and no national level exam clearance, having admission to PhD is not possible. So that is the, I mean, plus and minus of MPhil, you can say.
Thank you, sir.
So
Yeah.
just wanted to add a quick thing on
Yeah,
what
sure.
Somdev said, because we started on MPhil. I think that in European context, if anybody is thinking right now to do anything, any study or mostly pre-doctoral study, I don't think that MPhil is any more available, because as Somdev has already mentioned, and from 2010 onwards, they're following this plan Bologna, which is like the Bologna plan, which is like they don't have any more of these MPhil that. In fact, I was the last student on that side, like I would say that year, because in 2010 they changed the program. I think they had like people who couldn't present their thesis, they extended it for one more year. I'm talking about Spain. And in the UK context, where I did my doctorate and my postdoc studies, I don't really think that they do even believe in MPhil anymore, because you do generally masters, which is all over Europe, is the same program. You have to have more than, I think, is 60 credits, the masters, and you have to have, like, the whole idea is to, what Somdev has already mentioned, if you do a thesis and you just get more pro to academic writing, it's like organizing conferences or being a part of some activity which is more research related. More often, for example, I would say that the MPhil thesis is the stepping stone to go forward to PhD and do the job. Now, if the master's program can do it for you, then you don't need to go for an MPhil, because in MPhil, what I did here in Santiago de Compostela, where I did my MPhil, and now I still stay here right now. So it's like here in this university, the program was only 32 credits, so it's really didn't reach 40 credits. So it's like, if you do it and then you don't continue with your PhD, then this is a completely time is lost, because makes no sense doing it. It's like, so you have to do the PhD after that. So they treat this program, this MPhil program, 2 years. So the first year is a coursework, and the second year is the thesis. So obviously these 2 years, they're considered like kind of a stepping stone to go to the PhD program, and you have to have one thesis done. But if somebody is right now thinking of applying for a graduate program and then a postgraduate program in Europe, you have to have in mind that you need to do like at least 2 theses before you reach the PhD part, because the first you have got like when you finish your graduation programs, like till your MA, then you just like the 5 years. I think now they have the program is now 4 years, but yeah, it's like when you finish, then you need to do one thesis, which will be small thesis, and then you have the master's program. Then you move on to the PhD program if you are interested. But I don't know how you will see that the PhD program, people are doing it in Spain. It's a very different system, very archaic system in several ways. But anyway, that is a different question. We'll talk about that later.
Thank you, sir. So now I'd like to ask both of you about your area of study and what motivated you into that area of study. So, Somdev sir.
Well, I thought alphabetically Anik will speak first, but then okay. All right. So my area of study since well, for last about 15 years, starting my PhD program, it is phonetics and phonology mainly, and to some extent morphology as part of my PhD. But then I didn't pursue it too much after the PhD. Phonetics and phonology is a vast area. Of course, this is one of the core areas in linguistics, unlike Anik's area of study, which is more in the sociolinguistics area, which has direct connection to so many other interdisciplinary areas. Well, in phonology, I work on a particular theory that is called optimality theory, which is, I'm sure some of you have already read it as part of your phonetics phonology course, but may not be extensively. But it is a theory that started in early 1990s, and then it is although it started in the US, but worldwide many people use it for not only phonetics and phonology, but also in some other disciplines, other branches in linguistics, syntax and morphology and other areas. But before joining the PhD program, I was more interested in NLP and computational linguistics. So my MPhil that I started was actually in that direction. And my supervisor, MPhil supervisor, Professor Gautam Sengupta, was, he was guiding me in that area. But my PhD supervisor, he's more of a theoretician. So he's a theoretician and he works in the phonology syntax interface. So partly his guidance, not guidance, I would say, it is his influence that brought me to the phonology area mostly. So, but parallelly, I also work in some areas of NLP, natural language processing. And recently, for last about a year or so, I am also trying to explore a new area called evolutionary linguistics, particularly evolutionary phonology. There's some wonderful work going on in US and also in Japan. And then, yeah, this is broadly my, work and the spectrum of varieties of areas that I work in.
Thank you, sir. Anik sir.
Well, mine is a bit of a long route too. It's like, anywhere when you start researching something, it happens to be something more, it's a gradual process. So my research could be considered as more into critical language policy at present. It's mostly critical sociolinguistics as such. So it's going slightly beyond what generally is studied occasionally. In Indian context, mostly is very descriptive, is very broad area and all that. But I went and my interest developed because during my MPhil actually, obviously I came here in Spain and my interest was to see first the comparative perspectives in both societies. and the treatment of minority languages in both contexts. And that's a point I do remember that Somdev and we got in touch in early 2010 when he was working, I think 10 or 11 when you were working in Qatar, right, Somdev, if I'm not wrong. So that's the point of time when I got in touch with him. And it's like, trying to develop, because I didn't know anybody in linguistics as such, because I didn't have any touch. Because I left, I moved to Spanish, then it's like, if you talk about leaving studies, I left MA in Spanish in Delhi University, where I joined because I finished the Spanish course of 3 years course in 2.5 years. So it's like, then finally I directly applied for this my advanced diploma in Spanish, and then I applied directly to the MA program in Spain, and then same time I received the Ministry of External Affairs Spain fellowship to do my postgraduate studies in Spain. So my interest was since the very beginning comparative perspective with like these two multilingual societies and the treatment of minority languages in both contexts. So I think, sorry, can you hear me properly?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Suddenly there was a message, so that's why I just got.
No, we'll get to that later on.
Yeah. So what happens that when I started doing my preliminary research, settling and all that, obviously the person I met, because I was very interested in minority languages. So there was one person who was working, is Professor Monteagudo, Enrique Monteagudo, happens to be my line manager still now. So like whom I met here in doing research, and he was very interested in the Indian context, because obviously in this northwest west corner of Spain, very rarely there are Indians, and obviously you meet like people who are not really, is like they have got this holistic picture of India, so which is sometimes very funny. I can go into it later maybe. But there's a cultural shocks and things like that. Then you settle in and you start doing the research. And obviously, I got in touch with Somdev at that point of time because I needed somebody who could just help me out a little bit, how I can go and do research in the Indian context. So I do remember Somdev's suggestions at that point of time that to reach out to people, write them emails and things like that. I got in touch with some people in Orissa and did some fieldwork with Koja language in Orissa at that point of time. And it's like just to know how to do the field work and things like that. So it's like having basic ideas, and the interest was always Spain centered, I must say, but I wanted to do something comparative. MPhil thesis came out, which happens to be much more descriptive rather than like this, what we call as a top-down policy documents. You study the policy documents starting from our very basic thing. Obviously, the starting point would be the constitution, and then you study how these language rights have been developed in different contexts, and how West Bengal and the West Bengal sociolinguistics situation came up. And I definitely admit that I came across Aditi's paper on multilingualism in Calcutta, and more of similar papers that got cited in those works at that point of time. And obviously, their interest, obviously in my university in Santiago de Compostela, their interest was like I should present only on Indian context. So it's like, obviously Indian context has a lot to say, and interestingly, many people see Spain as a monolingual country. So it's not true. So Spain speaks more than, they have got 12 languages which can be considered as indigenous languages, and then you have like wide range of languages which are like the immigrant languages. So it's like there is a continuous people who are doing research in code switching, code mixing. They have got stuff to do. People like me, for example, there are people with theoretical linguistics. They are also doing stuff as well. But my interest always was related to the minority language and how these languages there's more ideological perspectives, why certain languages are in use and why certain are not. And then obviously my research is very much speaker-centered, because I see language policy or the policy research as such as a broader perspective, and I see it from that every individual plays an important role in the context of language policy or family language decisions. So that was one of those areas that I chose for my PhD. And obviously when you start doing PhD, many of you maybe are doing it or you are starting it. So it's very normal that I always say to my students in doctoral programs, that is very normal that you have got a very scattered thoughts at that point of time, and then you just like bring the, as they say in King Lear, like method in madness. No, so you just see the madness first, and then you bring method to it, and that's how it works in specifically in the UK context, because you have got hard and fast 3 years of funding, and you need to finish. I don't know how it was in Somdev's context, because in my context it was 3 years of funding, you finish it or you leave, one of these things. So it's like I had got like, obviously then you just move on and keep working on it, and then you apply for funding. These are the process that you go one by one, step by step. So obviously I developed my interest while doing research in like for the first time I enjoyed doing research, I must say. Then when I joined Harriet-Potter University, I already had a thesis in my pocket, and I knew how to do the research. I had like the very interesting thing. This sound very harsh maybe for some, because it sounded very harsh to me. So I don't believe in it, but I must say that my professor said at some point that without 3 publications, a PhD is a trash. That was the phrase of my supervisor in Santiago. But he really, in fact, like in a sense, that guided me in several times. Like, okay, you keep publishing, because if you are doing it, and because it's a process. Because in Spain, normally what happens, I don't know how much in India, Somdev could tell me much on that, because many people, they generally try to publish 2 or 3 papers so that they could fit in as a PhD chapter as well, which is a very common practice in Spain. So, but these chapters needs to be published in a ranked journal and all that. All this ranking thing is very tough over there. So like I had like publications that were published in journals in India, for example, or maybe my first paper was in a JNU journal, which was like Hispanic Horizon. So like obviously these papers were not really seen as accepted as such. But yeah, but finally what happens that this is kind of a practice that you keep on doing, and you get better on it. You get cancelled, for example, some papers got rejected. So you build on it and you just develop on it. So it's how it works, and you grow interest day by day on it, because you like what you do, because you can't do a research that you don't like, because you need to love your research, because that's how you live on it, right? So that's what I feel personally.
Thank you, Anik sir. So I have a follow-up question with that. Since you mentioned your work is dominantly on language policy, so language policy has a very intimate relation with power. So as a professional, what do you think is a linguist or budding linguist's role within that power hierarchy to be able to help or uplift the endangered communities or languages?
Well, thank you very much. It's a very tough question, I must say, Ovik, because power is something that sometimes I think in your question it came up as if it was something top down, right? But power is not top down. My own background is as a post-Marxist person. I must say that as a post-structuralist, I see power as a net, as Michel Foucault would say. Michel Foucault, his research was more about power is seen as a kind of a net. It reaches every individual and every grain. So its power is also discourse at the same time, whoever has that mode at that point of time. So my research has shown that there are many other things, because what happens in language policy perspective is important. Both sides are important. One side is obviously top down, but we can call as more of a governmental efforts, or more of, we can say that the legalization process and all that. But think about it. They are important, develop the standard of a language and give it more of a cultural value of that language, giving some added value to the language. But at the same time, it is much more important to reach the speakers, so that they could know that their language is valued as well. Because many languages in the world, they are not part of any policy as such from the government, but they are still being maintained. While other languages you will find, for example, they are continuously in Galician context, or several other minority languages in Europe, they're continuously on the verge of like being lost or something, because you can see that there is a language policy in place, but the language shift process is still continuing. And it's not like, obviously there are several reversing language shift processes on, but the language shift is still incessant in certain ways. So obviously, what I always suggest, because I worked as a with an adversary capacity with the Galician language policy makers here. So one of the most important things is how to elevate the status of the language and let the speakers know what the value of their languages are. So that is very important at the very beginning. So as I've mentioned, that every speaker has their right, have their possibility to choose their language on that ground. So obviously in this context where there is a minority language, I centered my research on parents, actually, how parents could revive a language, because obviously intergenerational transmission is a very important factor in maintenance of a language, and mostly the problems are related to the language shift that is occurring. So like even a few weeks back, Somdev and I were discussing about family language policy perspectives in Ropar, for example. He himself was telling me that how languages are getting mixed and how Bengali is being maintained in his family and how he tries to do it on his own. So it's like these kind of things. So obviously, if the government in Ropar, even if they are not giving the sufficient support, family is always a very important factor to begin with the process of maintaining a language. So it's like obviously the power is not related and only in the hand of the government. What I'm seeing that people on the ground, they can create their bottom-up language policies and may resist those policies that is there from the top. So that is more or less my research in different contexts, obviously.
Thank you very much, sir. Somdev, sir, would you like to add something to it?
Well, I'm not exactly in the language policy area, but sometimes I and Onik, we discuss, and we are also planning to do something together, and to some extent we had certain discussions on this. And to me it is like okay, let me put it from this point of view. I'm away from my mother tongue speaking region, that is West Bengal, for about 18, 19 years now. So of course I visit regularly, etc. But my son, who is hardly about 8 years old, for him it was, he never got exposed to Bengali speaking environment outside my family, right? So only he hears the language at home. But interestingly, I noticed that even with fellow Bengali speaking kids in the same housing society, they always speak in Hindi and sometimes in Punjabi, because he studies in a school in Chandigarh. And unless, as Anik was mentioning, unless the family has certain reinforcement in the language maintenance, particularly the mother tongue, may get lost. But well, with Bengali it may not be the case, because Bengali is in general a stronger language compared to many other languages which are weaker, in the sense they have less government support and recognition and all this. Well, Bengali may not face the same fate so soon, but it is true for many other language it is possible. But well, I really don't want to go or even try to go deep into it, because Anik is there and he is much of an expert in this area.
Frankly speaking, Somdev and I, we talked about, because Somdev's long research interest in lesser known languages, they are pretty much connected, because if you document the language, there needs to be a second stage of it.
Yeah, actually, you may remember, Anik, one of my PhD student, who has of course completed it a couple of years ago, his research area was a language which is in the verge of endangerment, but which is, at least at some point of time, it was a large language speaking community. That is called Kanauji, which is spoken in UP, Kanpur and surrounding districts. So Kanauji, as you know from history, that term Kanauj comes. So that language itself is he himself is an Kanauji speaker, and I mean, in that time when he was collecting data and we are analyzing everything, we saw how a language actually declines even with a very rich heritage, even with a large number of speakers. The way the speakers, the newer generation, they just identify themselves with only one tag. They're Hindi speakers. They do not take the term Kanoji nowhere. That was really something that that worries that puts us in a state that how languages eat other languages, how a language slowly vanishes, and there is a lot of power game in it.
Just added to this, right, since we have discussed this when I was visiting Somdev in Ropar back in 2018, I think that's a point of time when your student was finishing the thesis and we discussed
Right.
about thing. And then I later come across other studies that are related to, more related to the 49 dialects of Hindi and then how Hindi tag works, right? It's like I'm not anti-Hindi person at all, speak Hindi myself. So it's like, it's not the thing that I want to go forward, but it's a very basic process that occurs in every single language context I have come across. So like I worked in indigenous language context where we are talking about now, and when I was a postdoctoral researcher at Queen's University, my research was on more immigrant languages, and obviously how languages are added as a value system in our society, that really makes a big difference. Because obviously, as a phonetician, Somdev will remember that how Lepage has tried to connect how people try to develop their acts of identity, right? Because obviously there are several other factors. In case of Somdev's own son, there's a peer factor is focusing, even if Bengali is stressed in the family, but when he goes there, because that's what he goes outside, because he associates, maybe many other cases we have seen that kids on a heritage language context or an immigrant language context, they associate sometimes home language is different from the language outside, because language outside is Hindi or Punjabi, so definitely he meets with those people and they want to be a part of the group. So that's how it works. And it's like there are ample literature on it, and we have done like research. I personally did my own research on it. So it's like there are stuff that is there, but what important fact in it comes there is like it's not doing the research only, because we need like a next step ahead. So it's like these languages, obviously they are languages now, because we need more of a cultural planning of those languages to give them a space. A very unique example is Basque Country, because I am just writing down because right now I'm writing a research proposal with a colleague from University of Basque Country, and we are comparing the Galician language with the Basque language situation. Every language has their own historical development, and obviously we can ask the historical linguist to work on it and say us more about that. But there is a sociological history related to a language. See about the situation of Kannauj in the context of like the development of Hindi took it everything, and then you are left out with almost nothing. And that would be the same case with other languages as well. So like the situation is not something that is different in the Indian context. Obviously there are things that are different, but I'm saying that the basic thing of language shift is quite common in both these contexts. They have got a very good reversing language shift programs going on in Basque Country. You will see that obviously there's like loads of research done in linguistics from David Lasagavastar, who has worked on acquisition for a long time, and he is widely cited in the context of applied linguistics in second language learning and things like that. English as a foreign language, English as a second language. He's a very known name in Basque Country. What happens that now they have got like, there are no native speakers left of Basque, monolingual native speakers I'm talking about. So all you have at present, they are bilingual speakers, so Spanish and Basque. So what happens that is the social use of the language. So people have the knowledge of the language, but they don't use it. You see the difference? So if you want to, it's the same with Irish Gaelic or Scottish Gaelic. When you go to the UK context or you go to Welsh context, the language use is one of the major preoccupations of many of these researchers who are working in sociology of language, because you have got a very good language policy. As I have mentioned before, that during my term in 2016, in the advisory board with the language policy of Glacian, all I said that you may have a very good language policy because what is good, what is bad is also referential. No, you don't know that who will be offended in the policy system because of the whole power game that we have already mentioned. So it's like, obviously there are many groups and power hankering people are in between. So whenever a linguist or a sociolinguist, a person like us who are mainly academics, go into this kind of system, and we find ourselves as a bit of at a loss suddenly, because think about, Somdev, you are in a body of a governing of a language planning program because you know about the situation of the language, but you can't convince everyone in that group that they should be done in a different way, because nobody does it. And there is a very unique thinking that I have seen almost all over the world, in South America, in UK, and all over the world in general, and say in Spain, obviously. The people think that if you introduce a language into the education system, the work is done. So the work is not done there, because you need to reach out to people to let them and convince them. You may have a very good language policy, but if the speakers of that language do not accept it, you don't go anywhere. I was doing a field work in Mexico in 2012, immediately before joining my PhD post, because I was invited there. And it was a very interesting thing happened that I always tell to many of my colleagues. That there was an interest from their Instituto Nacional de Lenguas Indígenas, which is like, they call it as indigenous languages. So there are Mayan languages. So one of those elderly people, when we visited the village, because the interest was to develop a script for that language. And that elderly person, obviously through an interpreter, because he doesn't speak Spanish. And it's like, I was there, and I do remember it was very shocking for me, because I came out with this holistic idea, this colonial thought that we are doing a very good thing for that language. The elderly person told me that our language, like many other languages, Mayan languages in South America, they don't have a written text, because they're only vocal languages. So it's like you speak that language and that's all. And I want my kids to speak that language, or my grandchildren to speak that language, but I don't need a written form of it. So like, we sometimes as linguists, that is a kind of a self-criticism, I would say, that we have taken things for granted. We go there on the ground and think that that's what I have thought is the best thing to do. Not necessarily. So if you prepare an written system for that language, it may not be accepted by its own speakers. So what's the use of it? There is in Germany, I think you do remember, we have talked about it, Somdev, that there was a huge thing about they calling some people as parachute linguists because they go to exotic places. And I think Somdev was telling me about that, because the term was quite common. And they generally don't give anything in return to the community. They just do the grammar and just freeze it. And there's the thesis depository of Germany, there are loads of linguistics thesis on it. Grammar's prepared, but no further use.
No further use. That's true.
So, sir, since we have our first semester students, could you actually explain in brief what exactly reverse language shift is?
Reverse language shift, when there is a language shift process is on, then you have some governmental or non-governmental efforts that are put in place to reverse that shift, at least to stop that language shift going on. But happens to be it could be from very different angles. It's huge amount of literature is done there. Obviously, I would say the forefather would be, so very basic reading would be Joshua Fishman's Reversing Language Shift. I think we all have read it at some point, and then you can just move on and study more things if you want.
Right.
Thank you very much, sir. So moving on to our next question, sir, since both of you have done your PhD from outside India, more so a non-English speaking country, so how has your experiences been, and what are the problems or difficulties you faced, and how did you overcome those problems? Somdev, sir.
Okay. The problems as such, I would say, for anyone going to a non-English speaking country from India would be the language barrier. That comes to our mind first. But believe me, it is not that kind of hurdle the way we think, sitting here. However, the more challenging thing would be to cope up with the educational system there, the actual research culture that we need to get into, because it is hugely different. um, okay, different does not necessarily mean it has to be better or worse. I'm not talking in that sense, but it is different. Well, I went in a well, my funding, unlike Anix, my funding was from a project. Not, it was not a scholarship as such. So I had to pay tax and all those things. So it was more like I was like an employee there in that project. And the project was from DFG, the German Research Foundation, they call it the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft. So that project was on German actually, but my German knowledge was not that great. I had a course done on German language before going there. That was in Ramakrishna Mission in Hyderabad. But frankly speaking, it was not that useful after reaching there. But luckily, my supervisor was not so adamant about learning, me learning German or so, because anyway, I had to write my thesis in English and not in German. But the German system requires that at least the not introduction, sorry, the abstract part has to be in German. But one of my friends did that for me at the end of my PhD. But well, during the coursework, I had to, firstly, in German universities, there are a lot of flexibility in terms of what a student needs to do. Many things depend on the supervisor and the doctoral committee's decision. So that flexibility is something like the committee decides how many credits a student needs to do. It is not like a fixed number or so, and what should be the grade, etc. So I had to do 3 courses because my supervisor, Dr. Hubert Trukenbot, Professor Trukenbot, decided, and I did that. 2 of them were in English. No, actually 4 I did. 1 was audited, not credited. So 2 of them were in English and 2 are in German. And in the German courses, not German courses, the actual courses were on different subject, but the medium was German. I had to struggle a bit, but by that time I could understand and manage that much German. That was one challenge, and then of course adjusting in the system in many other ways. I mean, I don't know. Anik can talk about Spain, about the work culture there, but in Germany, the people are, they're very hardworking, and frankly speaking, I have not seen. I mean, wherever I visited in the world, they are really, really hardworking in the sense. Uh, the working days were really tough, but the weekends were really free. They hardly work, and I had to get adapted to that thing. I had a habit, as a very typical Indian habit, of calling each and every professor a sir, and I was stopped on almost day 1 there. Do not call me sir, etc. I was never, given knighthood and all the sarcastic comments I got, and then yeah, these were certain challenges, but there are so many advantages thing, like the library was super rich, and I'm sure many of our university libraries are also very, very rich. I remember even the library at Sanskrit College. It's a it's a gold mine if somebody can dig properly. Calcutta University's library I visited a couple of times. Extremely good collection. So the thing is, I learned there how to access the library so well. So I mean, just not going by the catalog, or I want one book and I just go and pick that. It was not the challenge. You can actually find gems in a library when you learn how to access it. So those things, etc., I learned there. And one, just to add here, one very positive thing for me to go to the Central Library of University of Tübingen was that once one enters the library building, it's a like 500 years old building. The university itself was like 15th century established. That building has a huge hall at the beginning where all the catalogs are, and there is only one human-sized statue, and the statue is of Rabindranath Tagore. And below that, it is written, "This is a gift from the Republic of India to Germany." And I mean, it always gives me, I mean, gave me that time at least an extra boost to visit the library, because in a German library, the only statue in the main entrance hall is of Tagore. I mean, that gave something different. Well, as challenge as such, getting used to the lifestyle also. Living in a foreign country where hardly speak English. I mean, you either learn the language to manage. I mean, of course, Anik learned Sanskrit before. I'm sorry, Spanish before going there, and he's more of a Spanish person now. But I was not that much, acquainted in German. Of course, I could manage to speak. I could understand mostly, but that was one challenge, of course. But my supervisor was very supportive, so I didn't face a language problem that much. And particularly my department, the Seminar for Allgemeine Sprachwissenschaft, was a bit of international nature. So there were students from many other countries. So I mean, during my student life, as colleague-wise, I never faced that language issues that much. And yeah, that's kind of my experience. I'll pass it to Anik.
Thank you, sir. Anik sir.
Well, yeah, to begin with, I would say that there are two different kind of, obviously, I will take what Somdev said about the research culture. It's different. And obviously, the lifestyle is something that I could feel very clearly that I didn't meet any Indian guy by being here for the very, like, first 2 years, maybe you can say that. I didn't meet anyone as such. So, like, the connection is obviously, if you live in Barcelona or maybe in Madrid, then the situation is slightly different. I think you possibly have read, I don't know, about the COVID diaries when they came out, and you suddenly come across in Anandabazar Potrika that there is a person in Malaga in Spain writing in Bengali, but obviously maybe a scientist. I think I shouldn't say it that way, that for example, I had some colleagues from Jadavpur University dropped here, for example, for 3 months stay. He's a chemist, a person from chemistry, my very own Otonuda. So it's like, he used to say like hilarious stories, like having an ICMIC cooker, to cook his stuff, and everybody came because there was like so much noise coming out from cooking rice or something, or things like that. And it was like somehow there was a part of which was very exotic, but on the very different side of that story is on the other spectrum, you will see the research culture. The university is open since 8 in the morning till 9:30, 10 at night. The library is open for the same time, sometimes 24 hours. So it's like you will meet students studying in the library all through the day, and they just go out and come in and things like that. You will see that you meet it, because I started as a postgraduate student, and one of the major difficulty in doing a sociolinguistic research, I believe, that is more we should keen to learn the language of the context. I knew Spanish, but I didn't know Galician. And if I wanted to do something on the minority languages, it was a duty on my side to learn the language. I could have skipped it, because I could have managed, like many other people have managed, doing it in Spanish, which happens to be like the dominant language. So it's like there was no such thing. But when you do a research on a minority language context, I think I must say that it is one of the most important things that you know the language. So I really don't have any fear or shame in admitting the fact that in 6 months' time, I couldn't really do it. And I do remember that in my first exam which was this A2 level exam, which happens to be in the European framework, I couldn't pass the exam, especially not in the written form. only in the more the communicative part, because obviously I'm living that silent period of learning the language. I'm adapting, I'm just receiving the input, but the output was not sufficient at that point of time, because writing was not an issue. Now I publish my research papers also in Galician. That is a different story that I come back to later. But then I do remember that I reached here in October 2008, joined the program, started doing the program, and I had like until July to learn the language. When I had the first test of Galician language, I couldn't pass, but in September I passed with flying colors. So there's a very funny thing happened in September, because I dedicated, because I knew the language, how it works, the structure, how it works, and then I just moved on and practicing it with everyone. So it's like one of the very good things that happened, that in this context, since their own people don't speak the language much, so if they say, because by color I'm a different person, like Somdev will be like, like you can see that that they're like, they can see that you are a foreigner, you're trying to speak their language. So it really, in certain ways, they have got a kind of a respect. And I also had a very quick chance in 2010, which was, I think, really framed the base of my research, my anthropological research. And my interest is, I took part in a television program. So like, because since I was the only Indian who speaks Galician, so like I got contracted by them, and the university is obviously my research institute, Institute of Galician Language, forwarded my telephone number, and they got back to me, and it was like almost a decade ago. But I started my research on my PhD as such on Galician language in 2012. But in 10-11, that point of time really helped me to understand how it works. I don't know whether we have got a chance for a few seconds. If I can share this, maybe it could be something like, because I end up speaking in Bengali at the end of the day, because they wanted me to introduce Bengali on the national TV of Galician, as if they're like, don't speak only Galician, speak also your language. So that's kind of a thing where you can like to share with people that you belong to a different culture, but you respect your own and you learn the others as well. So that's how it works. And it helped at the end of the day in certain ways. There's a very funny term came up that at a later stage, obviously, because I have done translations from Bengali to, from Galician to Bengali and all that. So it's like the president of the Royal Galician Academy affectionately called me Bengalego, which means the good Galician. It's a word game, because Bengali from Beng and Galego means a person, the language is Galician. In Galician language is known as Galego. So he used to call me Bengalego. It's like an affectionate term. So people are open-minded on that ground. In Spain, they respect and they admit those things. I think for a sociolinguist, it's important to learn the language that I have mentioned. Another thing is the research culture. I do agree, whatever Somdev mentioned before, that how people do research, it was very difficult to access to the libraries and all that. Here, I asked for a book, I have it on the next day. So definitely, I must admit that was something very surprising coming from a background. Obviously, in Delhi University, there were a fantastic library. I used extensively while studying in Delhi University, my advanced diploma course. I used JNU library a lot. I do agree that that is also very important, this interlibrary things, that is very positive things as well. But in these countries, these are one of those things. And sir, my goodness. So when I stated my supervisor, sir, and we still continue calling him affectionately, sir. It's like now I call him with name, but in the very beginning, he used to have a good fun with me, saying that calling me sir. I was like, I'm not English. Why are you calling me sir? Call me my name. So like Kike, it's like a short name. So like, this coffee culture, that is also very positive. I don't know whether in your research institute it was a culture or not, but in my context, I do remember when I did research in Spain, like the first 4 years, when you get introduced to the research concept and a part of a group and community, the community building is really underscored in this context. In this sense, because we have got like at 11, there will be a coffee break when we will meet up together. We'll talk about every single thing, including and excluding research. This community builder thing is very important. Weekly one seminar is attainable for everyone. You have to be there and to learn at least from different, maybe I don't understand anything on phonology, but I would be there because Somdev is speaking, because that's kind of a community building. Maybe I didn't have a chance to do it in India, so I'm not very sure how it works in the Indian context. Maybe you can share with me on that perspective. But yeah, it was very useful. It was extremely, I would say, the other corner when I started my PhD in Scotland. The Scottish, it's like, there's like Spaniards are in various ways. I find they're like Indians. So like you have the dinner around 9:30 at night. It's not like in Somdev in Germany, I assume you have the dinner at 6:30. So it's like 6:37. You can tell me.
It's pretty early there. Right.
So yeah, tell me.
Yeah, I mean, well, I hear about the standard norm of addressing, teachers, professors in German universities. Well, when I went there, of course, that was a bit cultural shock when my supervisor asked me to call him by his first name. It is, I mean, almost never we do it in India. But well, I got used to that. His name is Hubert Trukenbrot. So I mean, for the rest of my stay there, and even till today, I call him Hubert. And now I got used to it. But generally, people do that. And in German, when people talk, I know, I guess some of you know German or learned it. In German, there are two honorific forms. Unlike in Bengali, we have three, like tui, tumi, and apni. In German, there are two, du and sie. Du is more or less like tumi, and sie is apni, more of formal address. I mean, calling someone by first name is one thing, but then I saw people actually address their professors as du, which is more like tumi. So then I realized that tumi and du should not be, I mean, totally mapped together that way. It is more of an affectionate way of calling someone by that. But then, well, another reason could be my guide was he was more of an American educated person. He did his PhD at MIT. He was a student of Noam Chomsky, and then he kind of brought that American culture to some extent, like a bit of relaxed culture. But in typical German social system, my department's director, he was a very senior person at that time, Professor Arnim von Stachio. He was like a typical copybook, blue-blooded, Prussian person. So he once told me, now that time got changed. Everybody, students call their professors as du and by first name. But even 30 years back, at the time of that great student movement in Europe, before that, generally students used to address their professors by Herr Professor this. Herr is Mr. in German. So not only Herr this or Professor this, it has to be Herr Professor always. That is irrespective of the gender of the professor. It is always either Frau Professor this or Herr Professor this. So it was pretty formal. But well, in today's time, they insist you call them by first name. But my other little bit experience in Middle East, in Qatar, I taught for some times in Qatar University. There, the students usually call the teachers either just professor or doctor. I mean, of course, we use doctor before our name, I mean, when necessary, as academic degree, but in India, nobody calls us doctor. I mean, while talking to address you, right? It is more like for the medical profession, not for academicians. But in Middle East, that is more of a common practice. They call their teachers as doctor or only professor. Sometimes they call sir or ma'am also. But yeah, that's my experience.
Okay, thank you, Onyx sir, and thank you, Somdev sir, for sharing your experiences. I would just like to say that we'll be taking up the audience questions and comments later in the later section of the session. Okay. And next, I'd like to ask, like, what are the prospects of getting a fully funded research in the European nations? Somdev sir?
Well, again, let me start with Germany as my experience. Well, there are two major channels to get into a German university. One is through DAD, that standard channel. DAD is the German Academic Exchange Service, which is Deutsche Akademischer Austauschdienst, which is basically a place where you get all the information related to PhD funding, where some positions are open. They have their offices in India. They process applications many ways. So yes, that is the place to check. DFG is also a place we can check, but DFG does not generally directly give you or show you the opportunities that are available. But DFG at least shows what kind of projects are funded, and you can directly apply to those projects once you land at that university where they were, parked. The other channel, I would say, it is not only for the European universities as the source of information. That is the Linguist List. Linguist List is a website, and it's a kind of organization run by US universities. Linguist List, if you access it regularly, you will find many job opportunities coming there. Job in the sense PhD positions in many places, not only in US, but all the people who want PhD students, they advertise there. Okay. Another funding opportunity I remember now. Earlier, it was called the Erasmus Mundus program. So Erasmus Mundus generally has the master's joint master's program, but they started PhD funding as well. But later, I think they stopped the PhD funding, or they rather moved it under the European Commission policy to something called the MSCA, the Marie Curie funding. I think the full form is Marie Sklodowska-Curie program. So this is not only for Germany or any particular country, but this is funded by the European Commission. So all the countries under European Union are funded through this channel. So MSCA, one should definitely check, because the funding is pretty good, and I mean, more than sufficient collaboration and bonding with major European universities across European Union. So yeah, these are the channels. As I said, I was not on a particular fellowship, but I was a project employee. So in German, my designation was Mitarbeiter. That means an associate, project associate, and that is equivalent. I mean, of course, the salary, etc., everything is equivalent to the fellowship, but that is the other channel. So it could be either the DAD, where the fellowships are given, or it could be the DFG channel, where the funding comes through some project, or it could be for other, I mean, that covers other European countries, which is the MSCA, Marie Curie Fellowship Program. So that's what comes to my mind. Anit, please, from your side, if you add.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would definitely thank you, Somdev, because you saved half of the work for me. So obviously, the first thing I would say that the fellowship that I received, I think that was withdrawn afterwards when Spain came into under recession in 2008. So it's like from then onwards, like I think, if I'm not wrong, I happen to be the first Indian linguist to work on Spanish linguistic minorities under that fellowship, because it was used to call this Hispanisme fellowship, which is like people who are studying about the Spanish languages and cultures. So like they come and do that research on it. Many of them were like mostly related to, people could apply for a wide range of things. And definitely the next stage was the Erasmus Mundus program, that I know that it was a very well-funded thing. Especially there is it's like very positive thing, because there's like more of a focus on women researchers from underdeveloped countries that included India, Sri Lanka, and then finally I think Bangladesh. And finally what happened, that India was left out or something. This is a kind of stories, but definitely because I was not a receiver of that fellowship, I didn't know it. Regarding linguistics, you have to check different projects that are there. If they're hiring someone, I think in European context, the situation of having a student from outside became slightly more difficult because of the visa issues. And I would definitely suggest that if somebody is looking more into our field, Norway is a very good place as well to do research, I must say. And also Holland. I don't know that whether they have got any fundings at present, because my current position in Holland, that I can see that it's like there are positions that you need to apply for and all that. But the PhD fundings are always available. What I would suggest, because for me it was very useful, both my jobs, like as a PhD student in Harriet-Potter University and my postdoctoral research position as well, I found it from this website, which is people who are working very much in the field of, or in the UK context, many of them already know it. I'll just post it in the group so that you can maybe then just filter it according to your own needs. And I think it would be quite more useful on that ground. So this is Jobs AC UK. I think many of you already know it, and obviously Linguist List. Linguist List, you will have a wide range of job opportunities for PhD positions and things like that. So yeah, there are funding opportunities that are available. You need to check for them. If you think that Spain will definitely require something like a language is necessary or things like that, not really. Depending on where you are applying, it really makes much more clear on that ground. So yeah, I definitely suggest that you should go forward for language jobs that I mentioned here in the UK context, because I know that the UK has for long now, they maintain still having students for tier 4 visa. I don't know whether obviously the current pandemic situation made several changes in different laws. For example, there is many other posts are on hold, for example, because of this situation, because mainly the UK universities, they really focus on students coming from masters, and they generally fund it afterwards for the PhD programs and all that. So you need to check it, because they also have certain small job opportunities as well. Maybe we can talk to other colleagues who have done it, like this kind of things. So maybe that could be an answer for me.
Thank you.
Ovik, can I just add quickly one point?
Yeah, sure.
Since Anik already mentioned Norway, I think we should also, I mean, the prospective candidates in the audience, we can also think of Sweden. It has a very good, it has a good number of very good universities, and their funding situation is better than the mainland Europe scenario till now.
And also Switzerland. I think, because
yes,
we're also, even I found one of the call for doctoral students last year, I think in September or something, there was a call open, and it's like they have got their governmental funding as well. But what you need to do, you need to go through first the university where you are applying. You need to know that what you want to do, because writing a research proposal, and it has to be connected with the proposal that they have, and needs to be interest of the person who is. It's a very different story. It needs another session to discuss that, how to address and how to connect it to their proposal and how to meet their needs. Because you need to think as because, for example, the first thing I did, I can tell you here, because the first thing I did after joining as a guest researcher, I had to review a PhD application, funding application. So the boy was, the lad was trying to do something in Brazil, and it was talking about like a large amount of money to do a code switching research. He was very well written project, not only linguistically, but also like according to that, he has got some prior field work done and things like that. That is very, you can see that the content is there, but it was lacking the right pitch. The pitch, I mean, so like why somebody will fund you for 4 years or 3 years, whatever the time, in a context of pandemic, and how it is useful, your research, for a larger audience. That's the kind of thing that you need to think about each time you are applying to any European university, because you need to see the broader perspective. And it also varies according to country. Because when I was studying in Spain, the idea was to think big, like a project would be that big, like comparing India with European Union. That could be a comparative study if you want to. But if you send that same study, and that's what happened with me, because everything is not a success. The success comes after the failure. When I applied in 2011 in Harriet Watt University for the same fellowship, I got cancelled because that was my project. It was comparing like the situation of India with the European Union language policy. Then what good thing is about that? They generally don't send you, but if you ask for a feedback, sometimes you rarely get it, but if you get it, that is really, really positive. They talk to me because the whole European system is on this basis of UK system, especially, they give you feedback if the teacher is very kind. So obviously somebody kindly forwarded my emails. I asked for some feedback in 2011, and then finally I received a feedback on it, and then I redeveloped the concept, what I was trying to do, and then finally I got a funding for 3 years in 2012, because the next year I applied once again and I got it. So yeah, that's a process. So you need to be and keep all these things in mind. It's not all about having a very good proposal. It's more related to like that proposal, because like, I know that PhD needs to interest someone, right? But you need to make them feel that if they fund this proposal, they will get something out of it as well. So like obviously, because if there is no connection with India for a person and they are not interested in doing something, you just can't expect them to fund a proposal on it, right? So that's very much the case. It's a different session, obviously.
So thank you, sir. So I would like to ask, like, what are some of the prerequisites for a student to be applying for a research outside India? Like, how should a student be prepared? Somdev sir?
Yeah, frankly speaking, there is no one way of applying like that. But yes, few things we can always keep in mind while planning a successful application. One, what Anik mentioned, first thing is you have to make a good connection with the person you intend to do the PhD with. You have to convince that professor that you have certain capabilities, in the sense project proposal, and that has certain alignment with his or her research areas, maybe a project that the person is working on or planning to work with. So basically you have to first study about the intended person. But again, it is not about one person you are talking to. You are parallelly talking and trying, writing to several other persons. Do not think one email will click at the very first day. So it's a process, but at the same time, the official channel, that is like application, etc., you have to also look for that. So for a starting point, I would say prepare some good project proposal kind of thing, the research proposal. And again, if you have all right, let's say someone wants to work in sociolinguistics area, or someone wants to work in morphology. Prepare it well, but also you should have certain flexibility within that. So one cannot be too rigid that this is my narrow topic. But again, we also have to keep in mind, if someone wants to work in the area of say syntax, and is at the end is forced to work in computational phonology, no, that should not work. You have to enjoy that work, otherwise it won't yield to a good work, right? So yeah, to start with, if you go by checklist, well, good proposal kind of thing, at least a statement purpose, sorry, SOP thing. Better to prepare one short version and bit longer version, because some people immediately ask, you have a bit more detailed one also? Yes, yeah, I have it handy. Many places they also ask for your, if you have written any thesis, master's thesis, MPhil thesis, because they want to see what is like your capability of writing something longer, how you are, whether you are able to build argument in a proper write up or so. So master thesis is helpful. Generally they are not very sure about the Indian degree system, but a fair thing is, well, I have a first class, or this much percentage, 55 percentage of marks, etc., from this university. Well, these are generally, I think, we all have, and we always give them whenever they are required, right? Most of the non-English speaking countries, they do not insist on GRE or TOEFL, but many places they ask whether you have any um, documented evidence that you can speak, write, and read English well, because at the end that is going to be the medium of your thesis writing, unless they insist on the language that is dominant, I mean the official language in that country. So I mean, if you are going to Italy, they may say either you have very good command over Italian, or some proven, you know, uh, track of English knowledge also. Now, how to prove that? Of course, the easiest way to give a TOEFL score, right? But if somebody doesn't have that, you can always say, I have done my bachelor's and master's in English medium, because in India higher education is mostly in English, and I have written my thesis in English, my lectures, exams, everything was in English, and like that. Okay, that is the language part. The other thing is, uh, we have to keep in mind that universities are ready to offer a PhD position if you fulfill the requirement, and the professor who wants to take a student agrees. But the actual hurdle starts after that, when the funding scenario comes. So one has to be very sure about the funding scenario. So I remember my sister had two PhD offers, from one from Newcastle University, and the other is from, I forgot, another university in UK. But she didn't have that long-term funding. She had a shorter funding, so she could not join. So that kind of problem arises. So we have to be very sure about. First, we have to parallelly check what funding options are there. So yes, talking to the professor, looking for if they have any specific requirement of, like, if somebody is looking for someone who would work in a project as well as at the same time do work on his or her PhD thesis, but the project is in an area which is very distant from the student's PhD, whatever he or she thought, then there will be a lot of mismatch. Means for 8 hours you are working on syntax, and at the same time you are working on a very different linguistic topic far away from syntax, will actually be a lot of balancing on the student's part, and that kind of application has less chance of getting accepted also. I mean, they would prefer something, you know, more closely related also. So these are certain things we have to keep in mind while applying this. I mean, yeah, I can think of this instantly.
Okay, thank you, sir. Onyx, sir.
Yes, I'll just add what Somdev has already mentioned. The first thing is that generally the call for like applications, it generally mentions, if it is not an open call, for example, is a President's Fellowship. President's Fellowship, for example, is something that is like open call. So it's like if you have got a specific thing that it's interested by, or from the department, they will go forward and do something with it. But in our context, I think, as mentioned Somdev before, you need to know the real person to talk to. remember one thing, the teachers are really, really busy. And the European system, like any other system in India, you need some time to reach out to them. Maybe once in a while, you need to rewrite the email and reminder them, like, because they are really, really busy. For example, if in my own context, I'm talking about, like, they receive, like, the professors who generally hold the positions, they receive like thousands of emails a day. I do remember that I had to filter my email ID when I was in Queens, and I was holding that project, which was like holding all over UK. So it's like I received like thousands of email every day. So in a context such as this, where you need to at least a kind of a free time, try to avoid the weekends, write an email during the week so that there is a chance that they could see it. If you send it on Friday or Saturday, there is rarely obviously, as my ex-supervisor used to say, there are people who are really busy and there are people who pretend to be busy. So I would say that there are people who will pretend to be busy, so let them aside. But you have got the other chances as well, the Commonwealth Fellowship in the UK context, that also needs to be taken into account. Also, British Academy Fellowship is also there for short-term studies. So you have got like several other options as well. I think somebody asked about the postdoctoral positions. Postdoctoral positions in the UK context and in the European context, there are quite a few, but they're very competitive and the chances are really, really thin when it comes to, like, you need to meet the importance of that application, for example, or sometimes they expect like the same kind of stature, like, you know, when you are competing with a guy who has got like 3 projects done when he finished his thesis, it's not the same as, like, I'm talking about a guy coming from science. You're competing with the same guy, and you need to convince the reviewers that your project is equally valuable. When that's the struggle that we generally come across, people coming from social sciences, and in linguistics is, like, I'm talking in a broader term, but it's definitely, Somdev will agree on that, I think, because it's difficult to convince the reviewers that it is important at the same time. So on the ground of, like, reaching out to people, you need to see the call for applications first, because you need to take the decision. I will give a very wee, like a small, wee is a Scottish word, a small thing I wanted to share. It's like, I was in Germany, and it was just before my PhD. It's like I was doing for applications, PhD applications and all that. Then I reached out to a professor in Regensburg University, because he had some minority language projects, but it was mostly centered on language documentation. Obviously, I had a very basic course on language documentation, but documentation was not my primary interest at that point of time. I was like any other PhD student, I'm just still trying. As I mentioned that, Somdev will say that I like language policy, but I will just try to reach out maybe if there is a funding, because without funding you can't move and things like that. So in such a context, I wrote to him and asked about doing a research on Ladino language, which is spoken near Leipzig. So that guy straightforward told me that we don't have any minority languages in Germany. So you know, you can fight with him, you can talk with him, but he's a guy who needs to be interested to fund your project. So you know that door is closed. So if you want to argue with him that obviously Turkish is spoken in Germany, so many Arabic is spoken in Germany, even Indian language is spoken in Germany. So there are languages that are minority languages. Now, how you see the minority language? So that is a very different perspective as well. So this is an issue that we generally come across whenever it comes to PhD applications. So obviously, to find the right person, to find the right place, everything is connected. So at the same time, you're competing with everyone around the world. It's not like you are meeting only people from the same context. So there are definitely, it needs to be clicked on the same topic. On a very personal note, I do remember that when I received my External Affairs Fellowship in 2028, I reached Madrid. Obviously, it's the second time I reached Madrid there, because I went there for a very short period. Obviously, I reached the office, and the lady told me that, do you speak Galician? So that was the first straightforward question to me after I received the fellowship. So it's like, I said, no, I don't speak Galician. Then obviously she asked me, and then she said that I have been here for last 40 years. I have seen Indian students coming here to study law, European law, and or maybe biology, or maybe Spanish as a foreign language. But I never met a researcher who want to research other languages of Spain. So like, it needs to get connected. You need to find the niche where it is, and then you can apply, and definitely there is a success. I hope so. We can, but the situation obviously in European funding context has changed enormously in last few years, because after the recession, the situation, I think in last 10 years really got changed. Obviously you can apply for the broader fellowships like Erasmus Mundus and all that, or maybe very project specific fellowships. In Spain, it's difficult. I do it very clearly admit on it. You need to be a part of the system to be it. Otherwise, you have the Erasmus Mundus to apply for. Otherwise, UK is a very open field. I know the UK context, and I can tell you that UK is a very open field. Even a few days back in Sociolinguistics, I published a call for application in Ulster University, which is on language policy. If you have got a good one, go forward with that, because that is a very good researcher who was who is leading that project. It's more on a social policy perspective, how language policy could be linked to social policies and how it implicates certain ways people's linguistic lives is very clearly mentioned there. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Onyx sir. I think I have a direct question to Somdev sir now, and then Onyx sir can take over from there. So, sir, like, what is the difference, or what are the pros and cons of doing a PhD in an IIT as compared to in a central or state university?
Okay, tricky question actually. The fact is both are centrally funded. If you compare a central university and an IIT, the funding sources are slightly different. IITs are funded by Ministry of Education now, which is earlier MHRD, and in the universities it goes from the same source, but I think through the UGC mostly. State universities are funded by state governments, and some are there which are partly funded by state government, partly central government, like Punjab University in Chandigarh, which is Chandigarh is an union territory, so it is partly funded by Punjab government, partly by central government. In IITs, things are like this. Firstly, in our field, I'll talk only for linguistics, not in other branches. IITs have engineering, they have science, and humanities and social sciences is the department where I work, and which has several subject disciplines like linguistics, English literature, economics, psychology, and so on and so on. What we do here is mainly as policy, the standard channel of admission is through UGC NET qualification. So if a candidate has UGC NET or GET or any equivalent exam or fellowship, the candidate can apply. And after that, there is generally in the pre-pandemic scenario, there used to be a written test followed by the interview. And now that whole online business has made it only interview thing. This is like the official criteria. But beyond that, what we look for, we ask for the SOP. We basically interview the candidate well, thoroughly. We also see there are not many linguistics faculty in IITs. But good thing is, in last 10 years or so, almost all IITs have some linguistics faculty. Okay, this area or that area. So everywhere there is a chance people can apply. But with or without fellowship, NET is almost mandatory, except very few. Like IIT Bombay also conducts its own test okay, which is also pretty tough, but one can also join through that. Um, PhD structure wise, it's pretty simple. First 2 semesters, each and every student has to go through the coursework, which is anything between 12 to 15 minimum credits. Each course is having 3 or 4 credits. And with MPhil, they get a relaxation of 3 credits. That means one less course. By the end of 1.5 years, that is 3 semesters, one has to clear the comprehensive examination and oral, etc. And that means the candidate is now eligible to start the PhD. And then there is the thesis proposal by the end of 4th sem. That means by 2nd year, one has to be ready with the PhD proposal and everything. Then the rest goes the research part, and by 5 years, one has to wipe up. Wind up, and then it can be extended a little bit depending on what is the situation. But by 7 years, one has to complete it anyway. So that's the structure. And funding wise, if you have UGC JRF, that NET JRF, the funding comes from UGC. If it is not there, only the NET qualification, then IIT has its own funding, which is equivalent to the same. To some extent, it is better, some of our students say, because the funding is pretty regular. Like it starts from day one, and that is very, very. That is a student's view, I would say, because sometimes the UGC fellowship comes a bit late, and so IIT fellowship starts very fast, and it is pretty consistent, and so many people actually prefer the institute fellowship. And apart from that, I guess every semester there is a semester progress seminar, which the doctoral committee looks into, and then the progress report has to be submitted. And if it is not satisfactory, like 2 consecutive unsatisfactory progress report, means the candidate is eligible, or I would not say eligible is not the right term, candidate may be expelled. So that kind of restrictions are there. So these are nothing but checks and balances. So there are some good points and some some points where if things don't go well, there is some negative things also. And I think compared to that, the central universities work more or less in the same pattern. One thing is, in IITs there is also a part-time provision where someone is working somewhere can do a PhD here on a part-time basis, but for that there is no funding from the institute side. The student has to do it on their own. But on the other hand, at least in IIT Ropar, unlike some other IITs, there is no student who is without any funding. So each and every student is funded either by UGC or CSIR or any other funding source or institute funding source. That means if you look at it from the other side of the ground, that we do not take anyone, even if the candidate is interested to fund on himself or herself. That is you can say negative part also. I have the other thing is, if you compare it with the central university, there is some drawback also. The demerit would be, in a university, in a classic university structure, you will have a full-fledged linguistics department. Let's say your own department, right? You have a lot of masters and PhD students who you can talk, discuss, and so. In IITs, the humanities and social sciences departments, they're not that large. I mean, that is a multidisciplinary department. So you get to talk to many other discipline students, but not many peer discussion would happen that way. In the sense, you won't have more than, let's say, 10 or 12 people working in linguistics at any point of time. So that we always feel something that is not right for the academic and intellectual growth of any researcher. I mean, you need to talk, you need to discuss with other researchers in the same field, in an allied field, which is not so well structured in IITs, particularly for linguistics. In universities, that environment is much better. But at the same time, here people have certain other advantages. I'm not really comparing with other universities, but I can just tell that the funding scenario, in the sense field work and like library books, etc., they're pretty streamlined, in the sense our students get good funding amount to visit the field, collect data, and so plus the libraries, if they want some book, they just need I mean, they have to give a requirement to the supervisor, and supervisor sends it and the books come. These kind of certain advantages are also there. I guess the universities are also trying to cope up in that matter to some extent. Yeah, that's the idea.
Thank you, sir. Onyx, sir, would you like to add something to it?
Yeah, frankly speaking, just to add, because I have been mainly very much linked with two systems, Spanish system and the UK system. The Spanish system is, as I have mentioned properly before, that you have got a fellowship, then you move on with that. They don't get generally paid like separately for fieldwork or something. Maybe it depends on the course. But when I did my PhD in Harriet-Potter University, there are two things that I would like to underscore at this point. The first is obviously there would be between like 13th to 18th month of your PhD project, there would be a major review, which is what I think after, I mean, you cross the hurdle, you start the PhD, doesn't mean that you will finish it, because you need to cross several hurdles in between. So that's the point when you need to show at least the pilot study that you have done, and the pilot study works with the theory that you have mentioned and worked with and all that. And that major review is an academic document. Quite often I have come across colleagues who have started writing papers out of it. In the UK context, I think one of them, apart from like being a master student and all that, if you have got a master thesis, if you have done it and you need to, the projection is more on production, academic production. So it means that you should have a paper written to come to the interview point in the university. And when you get accepted, and then after that, you move on and do your stuff. You have got 18 months and you do it, your like, what do you call it, as a pilot study, then you write it down, and it needs to be academically well knit project to forward it to the, because then there will be internal examiners, which happens to be somebody else from the colleagues from the department, like senior colleagues, the professors and all that, they will give you comments on it. And I have come across people that had to leave their PhD because their major review was not approved after two intents. So, but the funding, remember the funding, even if you don't cross that limit and all that, but the funding is limited for 3 years. So after that, you have to pay for your PhD coursework, not anymore coursework, like to maintain your affiliation with the university. So then afterwards, the final part, obviously the whole process that you go through, and then once you are crossed, then you have the, in UK context, a PhD can be cancelled. That is how difficult it is sometimes, because normally it's, normally, I'm talking about normally, I know Edinburgh University, I know Napier University, I know people from Glasgow University, because with whom I have worked with and all that. So I can tell you very clearly that when it comes to the defense of the PhD thesis, normally it's a person with whom your supervisor has never written a paper. So that means that you give the profiles of the academic profiles, you think that they're good and you have cited them in your research, you ask for them, and the university decides whether they can, your department and all that will decide that what would be the best persons in general to invite and all that. Generally, normally, to be on a non-official note, your supervisors will ask that whom would you like to have in your PhD examiner. So when it comes, you can give 3 or 4 recommendations, but remember that person shouldn't have done any project or any research with your supervisor or supervisor from a long perspective. So it's like, it's like if you have written something 10 years back, maybe that's an accepted thing. But in the university sector, they will never accept a person who has closely worked with your supervisor. So it's
like that's a conflict of interest.
Is there. So after that, then you need to see also that you have cited that person in your research so that you can really argue that what he has done and all this. And then when it comes to the defense point, and then you have got 2 different kind of corrections. One is minor correction, which happened in my case, for example. In Spain, on the contrary, they don't have, people generally meet up for this defense and it's done. So like when it's your PhD supervisors who decide that whether the thesis is good enough to be submitted and to be considered as a PhD defended. So you are there and defending your own thesis, and people will do some protocolary things, and then it's done. But in the UK context, is weirdly different. I can tell you that.
I can tell in Germany also it is not at all like Spain. They grill like anything.
So that's the reason there is a huge difference when it comes to the world ranking of universities, because they give you, I was like, I do remember that I was grilled for 3 hours, and especially 3 hours was like I enjoyed it. Frankly speaking, the most enjoyable part of my research until now, I must say, was my PhD defense, because that was my child that I have it for so many years. So obviously there's something, and I do remember one thing that I say, that there are 2 things. One is minor revisions, another is major revisions. And it may reach a point that if they don't think the standard is good enough, they have the right to cancel your thesis. So there are like 3 options, because I used to say my Spanish friends, they receive cum laude and all that. I was like, man, you can get it cum laude, but the system sometimes is widely different. And that is one of the things that you need to fight for every single minute. Yeah. And they will never let you things easy. Maybe somebody else could do it, but I don't know any one of my colleagues who did PhD from Harriet-Potter University had it easier. So it's like minimum thing that you need to keep in mind, that you give the best quality available for it, you respond to their question clearly. And one of the very important things, if you are defending a PhD in a UK context, never wear a tie if you're a man. So you definitely don't want to sweat. Well, that was not my case, but I was not wearing a tie because I was told beforehand from a friend who had to sweat. So I kept that in mind. So keep it in mind. It's like there's some fun part in it. So anything else that Ovik that you want me to add?
No, nothing else. Thank you, Anit sir. Okay, so I'll move on to my last question. Then we can take the comments and questions from the audience. So my last question would be that, broadly speaking, linguistics, as we know it, is not quite a known subject in India. So how is other nations, other countries, how are things different in other countries, and what can we as a country or a state do things differently to make people more aware about the subject? Yeah.
No, you should start, because my battery, laptop battery is dying. So I'll shift to mobile in between. You please start. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. First of all, in the Spanish context, is a subject is now philology, because it's not like they have the humanities department as such as we generally come across, but in the Spanish context is a department of philology that involves both language and literature. So you have like wide range of languages taught there and different subjects in it. So linguistics is, I don't really think that is a such unknown subject or anything, because you have the whole department related to it. In the UK context, however, the situation is slightly different, because the neoliberal systems in the UK universities, that I do say that even includes Queen's and Harriet-Watt University. Harriet-Watt happens to be the university made by James Watt, who did the steam engine. So obviously it was a technological university when it started, so it was more technical issues. So the main fact was languages more from a translation and interpretation perspective. So when the post was announced, I do remember that one of the things that they asked for, a person who speak like at least 2-3 languages from, you have to have like 5 languages, 3 from Europe and 2-3 from other places. So like I applied for it and I got the second time. But what I wanted to say that there is no such thing as linguistics department. So I was a part of like languages and management, my department. So it's like it was like linked with the management studies. So I taught Spanish there, and I used to teach Spanish courses to like first year students of management. So like then you have all the studies related to translation and interpretation, technical issues in interpretations, for example, that how to use your voiceover and things like that. And then you do, it's like mostly technical stuff where you need the knowledge of language, but more related to its practical use. However, if you go to old universities that are really still maintaining those languages and language departments, their linguistics is quite well known. For example, if you go to Cambridge, if you go to Oxford, or maybe if you go to in the context of Edinburgh University itself, but not the same case in the case of Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh, or it's not the same case in the context of Napier University in Edinburgh, or in the Harriet Potter, as I have mentioned. If you go to Glasgow, they have got more of a broader department related to language and culture. So that's why interdisciplinarity is widely valued in the UK context. That I definitely want to mention, because that is something is seen as a future. So it's like if you speak 2-3 languages, and if you will research in diverse regions, they're very much valued. It's like they don't believe in a school system that it used to be in India, for example. I don't know, Somdev can explain more on that. It's like how it's like if you're a linguistics person, then you studied only linguistics and you do research in linguistics, and in future you do linguistics as well. So you're not allowed to do anything else. If you go and do other stuff, is not that accepted. It's very much in Spain as well. So Spain very much, for example, I do remember that one of my like my project reports were like said that this guy doesn't have a specialization. I came across this kind of stuff. So it's like, it's not that sometimes you don't come across things, because people really struggle to see beyond the boundaries. So it's like UK Institute in some way or the other try to see that things on a, and it's very much in the, if I'm not wrong, Somdev, you can correct me, in the US context, it is also, you need to see the beyond the boundary and create bridges, different disciplines, and make it more interdisciplinary possible, things like that. It's a very normal thing, I think. And in Germany, for example, that is also, once again, I sent a proposal and it got like shortlisted and accepted in Ruhr University, Bochum. So my project was on Indian parents and their language maintenance in Germany. So the lady, because she knows that I speak Spanish and I do research on the Spanish linguistic communities, so her only option was that I will accept this project if you include a comparison with Indians with Spaniards, like the Spanish-speaking population. So like, subject has to be related to a specific project. If you sent it along, because I had a discussion beforehand with her, so they didn't want to accept that as a proposal. That's a kind of a short story on it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Somdev, sir?
Yeah, Anik kind of covered it almost. Basically, the point is nowadays there is the departments are mostly interdisciplinary. They are not purely linguistics in most of the places. But also it is true that there are universities where you have the classical Department of Linguistics, and they started some centers which are more interdisciplinary in nature, but which has a linguistic component. Particularly in Germany, the older universities, most of the German universities are pretty old, like few hundreds years old, and They have linguistics or philology related department. Also, they started many centers and additional departments which are more interdisciplinary in nature, computational, cognitive, neural, language and culture. So many varieties are there. In India also, I think the trend is coming, and many places you will see. For example, where I did my masters in Hyderabad Central University, although people call it like it is the linguistics department, but officially it is Center for Applied Linguistics and Translation Studies. So, firstly, this is not a department as such. This is a center. Secondly, this is not only linguistics but linguistics and translation studies. Similarly, there are so many clubbed things that are coming up. But it is true that in oh, by the way, the degree wise, Anik, I don't know, Anik mentioned it or not. In UK, there are several universities which give an MSc degree in linguistics, not MA degree.
They do.
They do, right. In Edinburgh or in some other universities, they give MSc.
I think in Cardiff, in Liverpool, I think
Right.
in various places where they have a more of a forensic linguistics, computational linguistics
But
image.
in Aston, they give MSc degree and Indian universities. But this is again something like the economic study. I think in Calcutta University it is MSc, and in many other places it is MA. But again, this tells you the trend, which is more towards natural science or more towards social sciences. Yeah.
Thank you, Somdev sir and Onik sir, for sharing your experiences. Now, I think we'll move on to the audience questions and comments, and Arundhati will take over from here.
Thank you, speakers. Thank you, Obik. Okay, so now let's move on to the comments and questions from the audience. First, we have the comment from one of our professors, Aditi ma'am. She's saying, in Calcutta University, a candidate with MPhil degree joining the PhD program may be exempted from doing coursework for PhD if the department allows. Next is a question we have from Shubhajit Nath. This is a question exclusively to Anit sir. Do you think films play an important part in language distribution, and which can be used to bring back or revive certain languages? In the Indian context, I believe Hindi has been distributed at large all around India, and Bollywood plays a very significant role in it. Similarly, Oliver Lex has been making films in Galician, which might have a chance at retrieving Galician. What are your thoughts on it? Onyx, sir.
First of all, I would like to thank Subrojit for at least mentioning Oliver Lashe, which happens to be a very a nice surprise. Definitely, films are very important, especially in the context of power distribution of society. If we see it, that Bollywood play a very important role. It's a part of the soft power. There are several, one of my very close colleagues who has written extensively on power distribution issues in film, through the independent films in the Indian context. You can read some stuff of Ashwin Devasundaram from Queen's in London. So it's we can say that there are a lot to talk about that. Obviously, the standardization process of a language is not a one-day thing. You have the standardization process on in Hindi, and obviously it brought into practice through Bollywood films, and we can see that how it worked. In the context of Oliver Lashe, obviously the film was very new, and it received an international recognition because of loss of slightly basis. Oliver Lashe's film is about Galicia is very green. So it's like a lot of plantation of eucalyptus trees are done here. And during the summer, when the heat reaches around 40 degrees or something, quite often there are some fires. Sometimes naturally done, sometimes it's all due to the deforestation planning of the current right-wing government in Spain. So it's like not in Spain, in Galicia. So that's what happens, that it's morely centers on that area, that how it impacts lives of people. People died and all that. There are certain, you possibly have heard about some huge fire in Australia early this year, and also in the US in certain places, and Brazil as well. The Amazonia, there are places like somehow like similar kind of like situation occurred. So Oliver Lass's film takes into account the Galician language, definitely. But but one film can't really make a big difference. It needs to be like at least maintaining the language. It definitely gives a kind of a boost in certain ways. So it's positive, definitely.
Thank you, Anik sir. Next question we have once again from Aditi ma'am to Somdev sir. What is the norm of address from student to teacher and vice versa in German universities? First name or title, last name? I think this question has been answered by Somdev sir already. So moving on to the next, we have from Meena ma'am, one of our professors. What about TOEFL and GRE scores? Are these tests relevant? I think the question of this answer of this question also has been answered by our speakers, but would you like to add something, Somdev sir?
I guess I already talked about it a little bit. Mostly in non-English speaking countries, they ask for certain proof, not proof, they want to make sure that one can write the thesis and carry out the research if the candidate doesn't know the language spoken in that country. But otherwise, they do not really insist on it, that it has to be a GRE score or so, unless that there is some specific program running which demands that kind of score.
Thank you, Somdev sir. Anik sir, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, it's very much similar what Somdev has mentioned. It's generally not that much for if you have an Indian degree and it is, for example, MA in Bengali, then definitely you need a TOEFL or Oxford English test. Mainly TOEFL, obviously, is very much widely accepted. Because in my own case, I do remember that I knew another colleague who had to do the TOEFL because he's from Argentina. So even if he speaks English, he had to do the TOEFL test to reach at least because since you have to have the B2 level of English to apply in a UK university. So yeah, that's a part of it. But since I had already MA in English,
Indians have certain advantage here.
Yeah, certainly, I must say, but it depends on the subject again. I mean, obviously, if you have written something already in English, such as a thesis is written in English, there is no need for it. They are quite open-minded on that ground because they know that people come from all the different backgrounds and they try to accommodate people. The thing is, you have to have a pitch perfect, as I've said before. So I need to have the project well, and then you need to, these are the like accompanying things that you need to take into consideration. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you, Anik sir. Thank you, Somdev sir. Next comment we have from Shayan Mukherjee. He's saying, today's topic is highly relevant for the students who want to go to foreign countries for higher studies. Next, we have the comments from Ria Guho. Often students ask about the procedure for doing a PhD in foreign universities. This interview is very valuable in this regard. Next, we have a question from Modhura Sen. Where can someone look up for postdoctoral positions? Are there some websites? I think Anik sir has already shared a link with us. Moving on to the next question. It is from Rajeshwari Datta. Question for Anik da. You mentioned earlier about your interest in working on minority languages. Can you say something about the languages that you have worked on or the kind of work that you have already done? Anik sir.
Well, I think mainly very closely saying, if I can say that, minority language more generally, I researched about our Indian context as well, and mostly in the Spanish-speaking sector. So I have researched in Argentina, in the UK context, and also the Spanish context. I have widely researched as well. You can see my papers are widely available in Academy Edu. Generally, I always upload like word version for my, like whoever wants to read them, so that because sometimes they're like, some of them are open access papers as well. So in Spain, in the UK, in Argentina, these are the more three areas I have researched until now. So what exactly is the question again? So what
the question is, can you say something about the language or languages that you have worked on, or the kind of work that you have done?
Okay, in the UK context, my research was about immigrant heritage languages that include all our Indian languages as well. So my research was also centered on how these governmental policies work in the school system, how whether these languages are promoted or not, and what is the situation of those languages at home. For example, I researched with various Indian families in Northern Ireland, and what their perspectives on maintenance of their home language. That includes, it's not a language specific study, if I want to make it clearly like, more visible, if I want to say that. One thing that I do, very contextual study, which is on the geopolitical context where I research. So it could be the Indian or other foreign languages spoken in the UK context, and in the Spanish context as well. So yeah, that's all, I think.
Thank you, Anit sir. The next question we have from Anindita Roy. This question is to Somdev sir. Could you talk about your experience with forensic linguistics? Somdev sir. Sir, you are mute.
Sir, please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Unmute yourself.
Sorry, I missed that part. Yeah, this is another area I'm trying to explore to some extent, but I have not published or did any research to that level yet. We have submitted one project proposal with a couple of faculty members from the York University in the UK and one of my colleagues at IIT Patna to the to DST and sorry to MHRD, and that is still under process or so. So once that comes up, we are planning to do something on the English variant spoken, and not only English variant, some other variants spoken in Indian context in the forensic linguistic analysis. But if you have any specific question, drop me a mail. I'll try to respond to that with the details.
Thank you, Somdev sir. The next question is once again for Somdev sir. This is from Rajdeep Banerjee. If a student wants to pursue his or her research in phonetics and he or she is restricted due to the lack of institutional infrastructure, then what should he or she do? Somdev sir.
Institute infrastructure can be in different ways. I mean, it could be a proper phonetics lab, like a soundproof lab where we can record the data for fine quality data collection, etc. But on the other hand, phonology research does not require that minute level of or quality of data. I mean, we can record data from the field with quite, I mean, normally acceptable recorder, etc. And it is very much possible. I mean, basically, the field data collection works that way. All my students went to field and they collect the data in the field without any structured laboratory setup or so. So yes, it is very much possible. Maybe an investment of 5 to 10,000 rupees recorder to do the job, which can also be done by a 30 or 40,000 recorder. So that should not be a big problem. And many of the times you really don't even need to buy a recorder because, I mean, we have one. My students borrow it from me, and this is like that. So it should not be a big. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now we have a comment from Aditi ma'am. Thanks to both the speakers for sharing their experience and words with us. We learned a lot, definitely an extremely useful session for students. We hope to welcome you both in the corridors of our department in College Street in not a very distant future. And the last comment we have from one of our professors, Meena ma'am. Thank you, both the speakers. You have done a great job to our students who have lots of questions about the subject and the possibilities. Hope to meet you again. Now, with this comment, the comment section, the question and comments from the comment section, we have come to an end. So I would like to thank both the speaker, and I would like to request Obhik from carry on from here. Obhik.
Yeah, so with this, we come to the end of our 3-day interactive session. But before concluding, I would like to thank our speakers for giving their valuable time and sharing their thoughts and experiences. I would also like to thank Aditi ma'am and Meena ma'am for conceptualizing this event, and Sylvan sir, Obhijit sir, and Shunandun sir for their support. I would also like to thank our research scholars and the students involved in organizing this event. And last but not the least, I would thank the audience for viewing us on YouTube and for their valuable comments. Your participation motivates us. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Avik.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Thank you, Anit.